Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Recently, Prime Minister Mark Carney appeared on Ryan Jesperson's podcast, and he was asked questions about their plans for gun control. Now, several of you were surprised by his answers and reached out to me to ask for further clarification. When I saw his answers, I was also surprised, and quite frankly, I was a little shocked because the dishonesty that is on display in this answer is something else. So let's have a watch. Let's see what he has to say, and then I'll explain what he's doing and the verbal sleight of hand that he's engaging in. Now, this appears to be a new Liberal talking point because we've heard this also from the public safety minister, and it's just not honest. It's just not accurate, and it is intended to deceive the public. So let's have a look.
Prominent gun control groups urging you to act swiftly on election promises on firearms. Meantime, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith went on the record at one of her recent Alberta Next town halls. I'm sure you've been briefed on it, saying that all levels of government and police within the province, including RCMP, have been instructed not to participate in any gun confiscation. What do you intend to do on the firearms file specifically? And what do you make of Premier Smith's position?
I'm not going to the exact quote. Maybe I'll leave the quote to the side, but I'll pick up one word there: confiscation. This is not about confiscation. This is about voluntary return of firearms for compensation of these firearms, and we'll run a process. Look, we'll have different processes in different provinces. I respect the decision of the province of Alberta, and
I'm going to interrupt here. When he says it's a voluntary process, that is not true. And when he says that they don't intend to engage in confiscation, that is also not true. And we don't see the host push back on this at all, which is unfortunate because this is a massively dishonest statement. I'll explain a little further, but let's get the rest of his answer here.
In their areas of jurisdiction, but this process will unroll. Canadians will have
Alberta's premier's mischaracterizing the situation, right?
Well, look, I didn't see the exact quote. You give my briefing maybe greater credit than it is. We're not confiscating guns. People aren't going around confiscating guns. That is anyone who says that is a mischaracterization. What it is an opportunity for Canadians to return guns for compensation. And let's be clear, we are not talking about hunting rifles. We're not talking or sport shooting or anything like that. We're talking about assault rifles. We are talking about weapons of serious weapons. Let's put it that way.
So that's quite the statement there. He says we're not confiscating anything. We're giving people the opportunity to return firearms in order to get compensation. Well, first of all, it's not a return because these things were never obtained from the government. But when he says it's voluntary, it is completely not voluntary. They have noted that if you do not turn in these firearms, and it's incredibly dangerous when we have the Prime Minister going on and making statements like it's voluntary, because if any Canadian gun owner watches the Prime Minister and says, oh, well, this is a guy I can trust, it's voluntary, I don't have to do it, then they could actually be putting themselves in incredible legal and actual physical danger. This is completely irresponsible, and the way he's presenting this to the public, you can tell it's a series of talking points, but it's not voluntary in any sense. If you do not turn in these firearms and the amnesty expires, then you will be committing fairly serious crimes. And the way these crimes are enforced is they will send armed men, the police, and they will kick down your door. They will drag you out of your house. They will prone you out on your front lawn with a gun to the back of your head while they search your house. And then finally, they will throw handcuffs on you and take you away to jail. So it's voluntary in the same way that it's voluntary when a robber has a knife to your throat and demands your wallet. It is not at all voluntary in any sense. People may get killed in the enforcement of these bans. And so when he's going on and saying, oh, it's voluntary, what he's trying to do is he's trying to make sure that people aren't upset and people aren't concerned about their plans. But it's not accurate. The only part of it that is voluntary is that you don't necessarily have to participate in the part of the process where they give you back money. But they will not allow anybody to keep these firearms, at least not in working order. They've said you also have the option of destroying them, which is, again, not voluntary. So this voluntary talking point that seems to have come up is dishonest, and it's so dangerous. Also, when he says, we're not taking hunting rifles, we're not taking sporting rifles, this is also not true. I compete in shooting sports, and at the last competition I went to, every single person who was there had to change the firearms that they use because the Liberal Party had banned the firearms that they use in competitions. In fact, the shooting sports I participate in, I cannot compete in the States because the guns that are left are completely unsuitable. In fact, the sport I'm competing in is basically on borrowed time because everyone is using firearms that are wildly unsuited to it because they've banned the sporting rifles. That is exactly what they're doing. That is exactly what they meant to be doing. And I'm just going to throw a little bit of shame towards Mr. Jesperson because he claims to be, a journalist. And the whole thing about journalism is speaking truth to power and pushing back when somebody is lying to your face. And he does not do that in that clip. In fact, you see, he says, oh, so, the Alberta Premier is mischaracterizing, right? She's not mischaracterizing. Mr. Carney was lying to Mr. Jesperson's face. And, of course, by extension, to every Canadian. This is incredibly frustrating, and the number of people I've had reach out to me who watched this clip and thought that meant, oh, well, now I don't have to turn anything in. It's, it looks like this has been canceled. This is actively deceiving people in a way that could potentially have them be the victims of a police raid. And I'm just going to go one step further. Any policy that you cannot defend by being honest about that policy, if you have to lie in order to sell a policy, and this is clearly a lie, he knows it's wrong. There is no way to spin this. There is no anything. This is clearly a lie. If you have to lie to sell a policy, then that policy is a piece of garbage. And quite frankly, any politician who is willing to lie to sell a policy is also a piece of garbage. I do not think we should tolerate this from our politicians. I have a low opinion of politicians generally, but this was stunning. Just stunning. And if you're saying, Runkle, you seem angry, I am angry. This, as I mentioned, this could actively get people hurt. So, members of the media, please, when you see a politician deceiving you and the public like this, you have a burden, you have an obligation to push back on this, to correct it. And I don't see you doing that. What are you for? Do you have a purpose? And part of the thing is that this kind of pushback is how you don't get politicians to come back. Because certainly Mr. Carney is not going to come on my show because I would actually push back on that question. So, I mean, Mr. Carney, you've got an open invite. Come on down. But I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah, I feel like I'm probably going to have to do a few videos talking about sort of political deception. And, the next one will probably be talking about a policy from Mr. Poilievre. So, yeah, I know there's going to be people in the comments going, you're just a political hack. You don't like Carney. I also have some issues with some statements Mr. Poilievre has made recently, and we'll talk about those, I guess, in a future video to come soon. So thank you all for watching. I hope you found this to be interesting or educational and maybe a little enraging, because quite frankly, this is something that we as Canadians should be upset by. I think that everybody should have the right to get at least somewhere in the ballpark of, if not perfect honesty, somewhere in the ballpark of like defensible statements from their politicians. It's maddening that when we go and like discuss these things that people are deceived by these kinds of statements, and then it drags the entire conversation down. So thank you for watching. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters. There's a link in the description below. At the $50 level, Bottle Shock and Oz, Canada's National Firearms Association, PJs Forever, Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, Kyle Fox, Angela Skelton, Cielo, and Shay B. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. Hope this armed you with knowledge. See you next time.